a man arrives at an airport with a passport from a country that doesn't exist. A child remembers dying in a war that ended decades before he was even born. And a boy vanishes into the mountains, then returns looking older, quieter, and different. 3 identities that don't belong to the reality around them. Welcome to mistiqlab. Today, we explore a few stories where reality glitches, memories refuse to stay in one lifetime, and the people who come back might not be the ones who left. Our first story begins with a simple arrival. It's about a man who stepped out of nowhere with documents no one could explain, from a country that doesn't exist. A mystery that began in an airport and ended in a way that shouldn't be possible. It was a clear summer morning in 1954 at Haneda Airport in Tokyo. Passengers from across Europe stepped off a flight from Paris. Businessmen, tourists, families. And one man who shouldn't have been there. He looked ordinary, mid-40s, short hair, dressed in a normal suit. Nothing unusual, until he reached the immigration. The officer asked for his passport. The man handed it over without any hesitation. And the officer froze. Not because it was fake, not because it was missing a stamp, but because the passport was issued by a country no one had ever heard of. This was the country of taured. The cover and the pages looked real, the stamps were crisp, and the serial number was valid. The officer asked the man to explain. He answered, confused, "I'm from taured. My country has existed for 1,000 years." The man pointed to a place on the map, a region between France and Spain. But where he pointed, there was no taured. The immigration officer told the man this country was actually Andorra, but the man insisted Andorra didn't exist, and he has never heard of it. The officer thought it was a prank and started laughing, but the man became frustrated and said, "I have been here on many business trips. Your country has stamped my passport dozens of times. Look," and there it was, Japanese visa stamps, entry stamps, exit stamps, all authentic. The Japanese authorities were stunned. This man wasn't lying. He wasn't confused. He wasn't mentally ill. He was absolutely certain that they were the ones who were wrong. The police brought him into a private room. They contacted the company he claimed to be meeting in Tokyo. The company existed, but they had never heard of him. He offered them the name of the hotel where he had the reservation. The hotel existed, but again, there was no booking under his name. He gave them the name of his company back home, and again, real in his world, but non-existing in reality. Everything he said was consistent. His story never changed. He was confident and calm, and the officers realized something strange. No matter how hard they pressed him, the man wasn't trying to deceive them. He was telling the truth, but this truth did not belong to this world. In order to investigate further, the immigration officers decided to detain the man and place him in a nearby hotel, under supervision until they find out what's going on. To prevent escape, they placed him in a guarded room on the 15th floor. One guard outside the door, one guard in the hallway. Windows locked. 15 stories above the street. There was no way out. He was given food, water, and bed. Police insisted they would continue questioning him in the morning. But by sunrise, when officers unlocked his door, he was gone. The guards swore no one entered, no one exited. The door never opened, and they haven't heard any noises from the room. They searched every floor, every room, every stairwell, every possible corner of the hotel. Nothing. And when they checked the room again, they noticed that his belongings were missing as well. His passport, papers, and his briefcase were gone. Every trace of him just completely gone. It was as if the man and his world had simply slipped back into wherever he came from. Authorities launched an urgent investigation, but there wasn't anything to investigate except the people who had actually contact with the man. There were no fingerprints on file, no belongings left behind, nothing. They also checked Tokyo airport security records, the flight manifest, embassy contacts, and even international police networks. No missing man. No duplicate identity, no family searching for him, no match in any database in Japan or anywhere else. He existed only in the moment they spoke to him, and nowhere before or after. The investigation continued for a couple of months, but it was closed due to lack of any evidence. Despite turning into a cold case, officers continued arguing about the mysterious man. Some thought he was a spy. Others believed he was delusional. But none of the explanations fit. Spies don't carry passports with valid stamps. Delusions don't come with perfect documentation, and people simply don't vanish from sealed hotel rooms. This was the perfect identity paradox. A man who existed and didn't. A traveler from a place that wasn't on any map, but who appeared in our world just long enough to be questioned, and then disappeared again. After the investigation collapsed, officers were left with something far more unsettling than a missing man. They were left with anomaly, the reality of a man whose presence was documented, yet possessed no records of existing anywhere else on the earth. There were no origins to this trace, no history to follow, no country to call. Every attempt to place him somewhere or anywhere led back to the same impossible truth. The man belonged to a place that did not exist in ours. What remained were only fragments, second-hand accounts from staff who remembered his frustration when they didn't recognize the world he came from, and that's it. Some said he looked around the airport as everything was familiar, just slightly wrong, like a dream he almost recognized but couldn't fully wake into. Others claimed his passport felt too real, too detailed, to belong to a man who didn't exist. Rumors grew, versions twisted, but one question stayed the same. If he wasn't from here, then where was he from? And more importantly, how did he cross whatever border separates his world from ours? A doorway? A mistake? A crack between two timelines that brushed against each other just long enough for one man to slip through? No one knows. And in all years since, nothing has brought us any closer to understand what he was or where he went. If a grown man can appear from a country that doesn't exist, what does it mean when a toddler remembers a war he never lived through? It all started in the year 2000 in Louisiana, where 2-year-old James Leininger started having nightmares. Not normal nightmares, not monsters or darkness. These were something else entirely. He would wake up screaming, "Airplane crash! Plane on fire! Little man can't get out!" His parents, Bruce and Andrea, were terrified. James had never seen a war film, never heard stories about World War II, never been exposed to planes beyond plastic toys. But the nightmares kept returning. Every night, the same scene, the same screams. And then James started describing things no 2-year-old should know. He talked about a plane he called a Corsair, a real World War II fighter aircraft. He said its tires would burst when landing too hard, a problem Corsairs actually had, confirmed by aviation historians. He said he flew from a boat called Natoma. His parents searched the name, expecting nothing. But USS Natoma Bay was real, an American aircraft carrier from the Pacific Navy. James also said he flew with a man named Jack Larson. His father Bruce, a rational, skeptical man, was disturbed. How could a toddler know any of this? They thought it might just be childhood imagination, until they visited an air museum. Inside the museum, James ran toward a World War II plane and stopped dead in front of the specific one. "That's my plane," he said. He crawled under it, examining the underside. A worker watching them asked, "How does he know to look there? That's where the fuel line is on Corsair," and most adults don't know that. James' parents were speechless, but this was only the beginning. At home, James started drawing pictures of plane crashes, dozens of them. Every drawing ended the same way: a plane shot down over the water. He signed every drawing with one name, James 3. His mother asked why, and James replied, "Because I'm the third James." That sentence sent chills down her spine. James later told his parents, "I flew off Natoma. We were fighting the Japanese. My plane got shot in the engine and crashed into the water." Everything he said matched historical records, except one thing. No pilot named James died on the Natoma Bay. So Bruce, his father, dug deeper. He contacted survivors of the Natoma Bay. He attended reunions. He interviewed veterans, and then he found the truth. There was a pilot named James Houston Jr., a young American World War II fighter pilot. He died in 1945, shot down exactly as James described, a hit to the engine during a mission near Iwo Jima that sent his plane into the ocean. One eyewitness, former gunner Leo Pyatt, had never told the public how it happened, but when Bruce asked him, Pyatt said, "Yes, the plane was hit in the nose. That's how it went down." And this is exactly the way the little James described the crash in his nightmares. James Houston Jr. was the only pilot from the Natoma Bay who died in that exact way. And do you remember the name that Jack constantly referred as my friend? Jack Larson was actually a real person. He was on the Natoma Bay. He flew the same squadron as James. Everything matched. James, the child that has nightmares, started describing details that even World War II historians didn't expect a toddler to know. He correctly identified the exact type of aircraft James flew, the model of the engine, the location of the fuel tank, the precise location of his death, and even his squadron members. His parents finally had enough and decided to test him. They showed James old black and white photos of Natoma Bay pilots. James pointed at one. "That's me." And actually, this was James Houston. Then they showed him a photo of the entire flight crew. Again, no hesitation, he identified, "There's Jack. We flew together. He was right every time." The veterans were stunned. Several cried when they met James in person. One said, "It's like he remembers things only we were there to see." The toddler's father decided to contact the sister of the person whom his son claimed he used to be. At first, Anne, the sister, was skeptical, furious even, but she decided to give the boy a single chance and see if he tells the truth. She demanded something only her mother and father knew. James, at age 5, answered, "Your mother wrote a letter to the Navy after I died in the plane crash, and she was upset because they sent my personal things back in a footlocker." Anne froze. The footlocker detail was true. A private, emotional family memory never made public. Only my mother, father, and I ever knew that. James had no way to know it. None. As James got older, the nightmares faded. The memories softened. By age of 10, most of them were gone. But this real case remains one of the most investigated and verified reincarnation cases in modern history, documented by University of Virginia, Dr. Jim Tucker, who is one of the most famous child psychiatrists, multiple World War II veterans, historical archives, and victims' surviving family members. If the toddler James really remembered the final moments of another man's life, then where was James Houston between 1945 and this child's birth? Did two lives collide for a moment? Did one identity bleed into the next? Because that's what no one can explain. How a new body can carry the last thoughts of an old mind, and why those memories faded only as the boy grew older. Two identities, briefly overlapping, one slowly dissolving while the other took over. And the only question left is the one no one can answer. Where does the soul go between its final moment and its next beginning? If consciousness can stretch beyond a single lifetime, how do we explain a boy who returns as if years passed in just a few days? Because this time, the mystery isn't memory, it's time itself. Our final story is a legend from the late 1970s in the Himalayan mountains, in a remote village where disappearing into the mountains is not unusual, but returning aged in years after being gone only for a few days is something no one has ever seen before. It happened to a boy named Arun, 8 years old, quiet, polite, the kind of child who rarely wanders off alone. But one late afternoon, while playing near the edge of the forest, Arun vanished. His mother called for him, neighbors searched the trails, even local volunteers climbed the nearby hills, but nothing. The search continued through the next day, and the day after. 3 days have passed. No footprints, no clothing, nothing. It was as if the mountains had swallowed him whole. His parents feared the worst. But on the morning of the 4th day, just as the search party was preparing to widen its perimeter, a monk from a nearby monastery walked into the village. He was calm and quiet, completely unshaken. He told the family, "Your son is alive." When parents asked how does he know, He refused to explain, but insisted they should follow him. They climbed for hours, up a steep trail, across cold streams, through pine forests wrapped in fog, until they reached a small stone monastery, carved into the side of a cliff. Standing at the entrance was Arun, but he didn't look like the child who disappeared. His hair was noticeably longer, not a few centimeters, but long enough that it looked like years had passed. His fingernails were longer, his face thinner, his posture different, straighter, calmer, older. And the way he looked at his parents, this wasn't the way an 8-year-old looks at anyone. It was the way an adult looks at someone they recognize from long ago. His mother burst into tears and ran to him. But when she touched his shoulder, she froze. The skin felt cold, not from the mountain air, but something deeper, like he had been somewhere where warmth didn't exist. They wrapped him in a blanket and brought him home. Doctors examined him. No injuries, no exposure damage, no dehydration. Impossible. A child lost in the mountains for 72 hours should have been weak, starving, and exhausted. But Arun only looked changed. Older, different, quiet in a way that seemed unnatural for a boy his age. When he finally spoke, his words didn't comfort anyone. Arun told his family that he had been taken in by the monks from the monastery. Only one problem. The monastery they found him at had been abandoned for decades. No monks occupied the place. No food was stored there. No signs of human presence. Just dust and silence. Yet Arun insisted. They were there. The men of light. He described them as tall figures, not glowing, but illuminated from within, like silhouettes outlined by warmth. They spoke to him without moving their mouths. They told him he was safe, that he needed to rest, that he would understand when he was older. When his father asked who they were, Arun's answer was simple. They're not like us. And when asked how he survived, he said, I didn't eat. I didn't need to. Things work differently there. The most disturbing detail came when his mother asked how long he thought he had been gone. Arun looked at her and said, a long time. He had only been missing 3 days, but as if the time he experienced didn't match the time everyone else lived through. A couple of weeks passed and the family returned to the monastery with other villagers, hoping to find footprints, signs of someone sleeping there, anything. They found nothing. Only the old monk, the one who had first told them Arun was alive, offered any explanation. He sat with the parents, hands folded, voice trembling slightly. He said, sometimes the mountain chooses who sees it, and sometimes a child walks through a doorway meant for another world. Arun's father asked him directly, where was he? What happened to him? The monk looked at them and said, your son stepped into a place where time is not straight line. It moves differently, and it leaves a mark on those who return. The parents pressed him further, but the monk refused to say more. He simply bowed his head and whispered, be grateful he came back. Arun never fully explained what happened in those missing days. As months passed, his appetite and energy returned, but something inside him didn't. He became quieter, more thoughtful, more observant, watching people the way an adult studies a child. Teachers said he seemed older than his classmates, not just emotionally, but in a way they couldn't describe. And most unsettling of all, when Arun passed the abandoned monastery years later, he would turn his head away and refuse to look at it. He only whispered to his mom, they're still there, but only if you know how to see them. No one in the village ever understood what happened. There were no police reports, no official statements, no physical evidence, only the boy's sudden aging, his impossible survival, and the words he carried back from a place no one could find again. Whether he stepped into a hallucination, a spiritual realm, or a reality parallel to our own, no one can say. But one truth remains. Arun left the mountains as a child and returned someone else. And no one, not his family, not the villagers, not even the monk, could explain what changed him or how much time he truly spent in that place. Some stories end with answers. These don't. A man who arrived at an airport with a passport from a country that doesn't exist. A child who carried the final moments of a man who died decades before he was even born, and a young boy who returned from the mountains looking as if time had passed differently for him than for the rest of the world. 3 cases, 3 lives, 3 mysteries that don't fit in what we call reality. Maybe these are fragments of something bigger. Maybe they're glitches in memory, echoes of past lives, or moments where our world briefly overlaps with another. Or maybe they're reminders that identity isn't as fixed as we think, that life doesn't begin or end as we imagine, and that some people carry more than one story within them. If you enjoyed today's stories, make sure you tap like, hit subscribe, and ring that bell, because here at mistiqlab, we're just getting started. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay curious, and see you in the next one.